Welcome to the first of two final Inside Government programs for the spring 2019 semester here at Cayuga Community College. This is a show that's broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as the college's radio station 89.1. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. On Tuesday, May 21st, voters across the state of New York get to vote for school boards and school budgets. This year, they're seeing two things come from Albany. One is that the 2% state-mandated tax cap has been imposed on budgets has been made permanent, but they've also seen a slight increase in aid from Albany. Voters in the Auburn district will chime in as well as to whether they want to pass a $78.9 million budget roughly that was approved last week by the Auburn Board of Education to put before the voters that closes a multi-million-dollar gap between revenues and expenses. The budget is up about 3.3% from last year, but unlike last year where there were 28 positions that were being cut in the budget, this year there will only be 3 staffing reductions, and some of that due to attrition. On the average, the $100,000 house, if you have a star exemption, will be $41. We're not going to get into the multiple layers of that because it gets confusing. But to explain the budget and all that is going on in the district, our Auburn Superintendent of Schools, Jeff PIROZZOLO, who I think is back for a record 58th appearance as far as the staff here is concerned, and the budget manager for the district, Lisa Green. Just as a matter of disclosure, I say this all the time, Lisa Green is a member of the board of directors of the board that I work for that is not associated with the college. In a sense, I'm not a college employee. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
So, long introduction. We did get 2 viewer questions on non-budget issue, and I wanted to talk about that really quickly. An issue was raised late last month about a test given at the junior high next door on bias. What occurred for those?
Again, you know, the topic was great. You know, our children have a lot of questions regarding diversity, bias training. I think the lesson itself fell a little bit short in the tool that we used.
So this was a 7th grader, and this was not a district-approved test?
Correct. No, no. It was just a teacher taking a risk, trying something different. And I think if we
never ever causes a headache for a superintendent when somebody takes.
You know what? We want our staff taking risks when they're teaching. You know, when it's something sensitive like that, though, we like to get buy-in from parents. We like to have some type of curriculum that we can follow. And we are going to be working on doing some type of curriculum.
So you've met with some parents. What were their concerns for you?
I think a lot of it was the tool that was used, the survey itself, and it might not have been age appropriate. So you know, we've already sat down, we've already met, we've worked with the NAACP, we've worked with you know, some other folks out in the community, even talked to people here at CCC about a diversity curriculum. So we're going to start looking at a lot of things.
So the term that was tossed around in the Citizen article was implicit bias. What does that mean for those who may not be familiar with the technical term?
Again, sometimes we have bias within our own self, and we don't really even know it's there, and making people aware of that. And I think that was sort of what they were trying to get at. You know, I think that we could find curriculum that could be age appropriate from elementary to middle school to high school. I think maybe the survey they used was more directed at master college level. Okay. So, you know, we need to sit down, we need to look at a curriculum, and we need to get some training from the outside.
And that'll be done outside of this
Correct.
Budget. So the second issue that's come up, there's been over 700 cases nationwide on measles. I know that there is a large pool in the downstate area where there are measles cases. What is, not necessarily district policy unless there is one on that, but what is state policy about vaccinations for kids and children who come to your schools?
So all children have to be vaccinated. In each year there's different grade levels, ages, so it alternates a little bit depending on the 3-year carryover. It falls back and forth. But every child has to be vaccinated. The only exception in New York State is for religious exemption.
So are you notified, is the Auburn district notified that there's a religious exemption that somebody was not vaccinated? That's the viewer question is, how does the Auburn know if there's an exposure besides the CDC coming in?
Well, and again, the religious exemptions, We track all of our children's vaccinations, all of our nurses and all of our buildings do. We're in complete contact with those parents that fall behind on vaccinations, and there's new laws and regulations that are really strict.
So a child might not be able to attend.
Correct. And we used to have a little bit more leeway. So if parents at least made the doctor's appointment and we knew they were getting vaccinated, we could leave them in school. Now, after a 15-day period, if they're not vaccinated, they cannot come into school. Okay. And for the religious exemptions, so as we're in contact with the parents on the vaccinations, if a parent says, well, we don't believe in it, it's our religious, they actually have to fill out a form and they have to actually write all of their beliefs. I have to go through it with our supervising nurse. We have
So it's done at the local level, it's not done through the state of New York?
No, it's done locally.
Oh, okay.
And I wish the state would come out and say everybody needs to be vaccinated and would just protect
And I will say, the
everybody.
last couple of guests we've had on, we've had a measles question for everybody, so you're not...
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ask Jeff Diker next.
No, and really, I mean, the state really should look at that policy and say, should every child be vaccinated? And I think with the outbreak of measles that we're seeing, I think that answers its question right there.
I just wanted to get those viewer questions
No,
off
thank you.
of that.
Thank you.
The real reason we had you on here is to talk about budget and numbers. I know this is your favorite part of the year by far. So what is the size of the budget this year?
So just under $79 million.
And you're up about how much?
About 3.3%, about $2.5 million from last year.
And what's that due to? Is it labor contracts? Is it because you have new
Yeah,
expenses, new programs?
It's all instructional costs, primarily salaries and special ed programming.
And you had when you came on, I think, at the end of November, and then you came back on in February, your multi-million-dollar deficit had shrunk roughly. What was it originally when you were starting the budget process?
About $3 million.
All right, so how do you close that?
Well, we had discussions with the board. We trimmed back some of our capital expenses, some equipment that we would have liked to purchase. We also were directed and worked with the board and agreed to use more of our reserves. We're going to use a little over $2 million of our reserves to balance this budget. Last year we used $1.3 million.
So you're up about
$700,000.
How much will that leave you in reserves after that's said and done?
It leaves it allows us about $1 million to use the following year, and then after that it depends if we have savings at the end of the year.
So that's where
if
I'm
we don't
going with that.
spend.
What happens, and we'll get into the budget formula in a second, but at some point you can only use reserves and rainy day funds. And I know you're a big advocate, and Gary Finch sat there last week and he said, well, maybe I said you were a good advocate for Auburn. He said, you're never going to be happy of what state aid is, but if you don't get that formula changed, what happens that second and third year out?
The cuts would be massive. And again, you're right, I'm always going to advocate for Auburn and our children.
He was complimentary to
No,
that.
I know he was. No, Assemblyman Finch is fantastic. The issue comes, it's really simple, Guy. I mean, I can't make it any easier than this. When you look at foundation aid in just our county, that makes it simplifies everything. When you look just in Cayuga County, currently Auburn is receiving $7,576 per student in foundation aid. The average in our county is almost $9,500. We're $2,000 below per student in the rest of the school districts in our county.
So not to get in the weeds, a couple of years ago you would hope that this had been resolved. So when Jason Lesh was on the board, you all did a lot of lobbying.
Yeah.
You thought you had resolved it. I think Senator DeFrancisco was there. But what in the end was the formula itself has still not been amended, correct?
Correct. That really dealt with gap elimination money, and we
Okay.
got it back earlier. They still have not fixed foundation aid.
And I thought when you were on last, or maybe it was another guest who's been here, was at some point that formula is up for review. Am I correct on
I
that?
think it's been up for review for how
Yeah,
many years?
There's
Okay, so
nothing-
they're just not acting on
no,
it.
No, it's
Okay.
been up for review. They have so much data in there from the 2000, 2001, 2002 census that they haven't even updated that information in there. But what my concern is Auburn being one of the most neediest districts in our county, how can we be $2,000 lower in receiving foundation aid per pupil than every school district in our county? That $2,000 per student brings $8 million to Auburn.
So let's talk about your student body before getting into the numbers of what they are. So how much do you think you've lost in the last, have you done any calculation of how much you've lost
Yeah,
over
we have.
a given period of time?
From back in 2008-9 when they froze foundation aid, we've been shorted more than $100 million.
So you wouldn't have had to do 28 cuts last year.
No.
No, we
No.
could have been adding programs that would have
Yeah.
been beneficial to our students.
You know what's
So you had I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, what's frustrating is that our class sizes are now between 20 and 30. They're all over. They're all over. We have a lot of school districts that are still 16, 17 children in a class section. Our actual fund balance is going to be under 4% this year because we're going to be using
And
about
is there
$1 million.
is there a state?
4% is the maximum
Maximum.
that you can have in an unreserved fund balance. So we
Is
do
the,
have, that's
is
about,
the maximum or the minimum?
it's the maximum.
Okay, all right.
So we're going to have under 4% because we're going to be using some for a capital project. We have school districts around the state and in our county that have over 15% in their fund balance.
So before the April budget adoption from the state, you met with somebody from the governor's office. You were optimistic, but what does optimism? What does that? How does that translate into reality?
So we met with Dan Fuller, and we're very optimistic. I still am. I believe we're on their radar. I think the problem was by the time we got in the governor's office, it was
Okay.
too late.
For this
They-
year.
Yeah, they were already meeting. I do believe that we have to continue to push our advocacy efforts forward. I don't think we can wait until December. We need to do it now so we keep
And you have a
Auburn.
parent group that's been meeting on a
We
regular-
do.
Okay.
We do.
So back to some numbers just for what you have. How much do you spend per student now?
We spend exactly $18,273.
You don't even have to look up that number.
No, it did change a
How
little
does
bit.
that compare to similar sized districts in the area?
We're about $3,600 lower than the average schools that are similar to Auburn.
And how about statewide?
Statewide, we're over 6,000 below.
And then you consider Auburn a district that has a high poverty number?
We do.
What's for free and reduced lunch, I'm not saying it right.
Yeah.
Free and reduced lunch, you're above the 50% mark,
Yes,
am
we
I
are.
correct? How's that compare in the rest of this county?
I don't know about the county.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
How about
don't-
similar sized districts?
Yeah, we don't
Okay.
have that.
Yeah,
We don't,
I-
and that's just 53% are the students that are directly certified. They automatically qualify for free and reduced lunch because they receive other state services,
Okay.
like food stamps. And so in addition to those students, we have more students that qualify based on income level and if they actually can turn in an application.
So going back to the state for a second, how much did you end up getting in new money from the state this year?
Our foundation aid is going up just under $1 million, so it's about 3% increase.
And but that's not what you had hoped for. Am I correct on that?
No, we were hoping for the full amount, but like I said, just at least.
So
to
a
get
full
us
amount
even.
would have been.
been another
Right now,
$4.5
Okay.
$4,582,000.
So I know we're a little bit all over the place, but let's go back to how you got to this number that you're using. You have 3 staff reductions. That again is different than 28 last year. Those reductions will be done through attrition.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
No
so will that
waivers.
have, what impact will that have next year just on classroom sizes? And I'm not saying just as to minimize
It
them,
will
just-
be an increase in some of the elementary class sizes. And the art position, we have an art teacher right now that is running a dual role, and she will just slide over to where the opening is.
So will there be a full-time art teacher at every elementary school or not?
No, they'll still be shared.
Share, okay.
They'll still be shared.
When you look at this, one of the issues you've got to always deal with is the tax cap. And you didn't get that number till later in the system, only because it takes a while for them to. What's your tax cap number?
2.23%.
And so what are you seeking to go to voters for?
So that is what we're asking for
Okay.
the voters,
So-
2.23.
So that means you need to get just 50% plus one. If
Correct.
in the past, was it last year that you did ask for a supermajority?
No,
No.
it's been about 5 years.
Has it been that long? Okay. So, and just so that you said I said 2%, you said 2.3.
2.3.
Because it takes a lot of different calculations in there, and it works it backwards from that. The Board of Education, last time we had you on last year, it was the night of your board meeting. Your board has since met. They have passed the budget, correct?
They have.
It was 7-2. The two individuals who didn't vote for it, why didn't they vote for it?
I mean, again, I think a lot of it was the concern of using a lot of the reserve money, which is a huge concern of Lisa and mine. But, you know, the question was, what do? Do you make more cuts, or do you go out for a higher tax increase? And again, I
And
don't.
you did have there was a board discussion 2 meetings ago where a major tax increase was discussed.
Right.
It was
and
discussed again last week.
it
Okay.
was. You know, our
Can
thing
you
is-
even sell that? I mean,
well,
that's my question.
It's not a community issue. You know, it's a state issue. If
Right.
the state is funding us the foundation aid, we can't keep going to the tax payers in our community raising taxes when the state needs to fix the problem that they have in front of them.
And the taxpayers were just very generous and approved a capital project
Yeah.
for us
in January.
in January.
So I wanted to ask that. So are any of those costs for that? I know you haven't even started
Right.
a lot of that. None of that is in this budget situation.
No.
When do they start hitting?
Not until we start borrowing money for the project, which won't be until,
It-
we may borrow money by the end of this year, but then we'll have repayments starting the following year.
When
So-
you say end of this year, are you talking
June.
18, 19? So
No,
the-
1920.
So
So
at
it
the end
won't
of
be
this
until
coming
the-
year, so it won't be until.
Yeah,
okay.
we've got a ways to
Following
go. And again, that also depends on the state and the approval process, how quick our drawings get put in and approved.
And that doesn't even give you an idea of what that will be budget-wise 2 or 3 years out at this stage.
The first phase is only going to be a couple $1 million, and then phase 1B will be the big bulk of the 28 million.
But your
That's a
payments
few
are
years
not
out.
going to be a couple $1 million.
No.
Your payments are going to be a percentage of that.
Correct.
Oh, that's what I'm trying.
Correct.
It
So
was,
you haven't
it was
gotten it.
under 2%.
Yes.
Okay. And the
Correct.
goal was to keep it under, I think when you were here back in November, it was.
Under 2%,
You wanted to stay
yeah.
under that.
Correct.
So in what you're looking at, last year you did have to make, I mentioned the 28 cuts. Did you end up having to lay off people, or were you able to do that all through reductions
No,
and
we
incentives?
laid off last
You
year.
did. So was there any idea, you did an incentive last year
We did.
for retirement. Did you consider that this year?
I didn't really need one.
Okay.
I didn't need an incentive, but I also have built in sort of an incentive in the contract now.
In the teacher's contract.
So I don't need to have a separate incentive now.
Oh, okay, so we
So
won't be
I've tried to
discussing
set up
that.
tried to set it up for years in advance.
And the tax increase that you have, 2.23,
2.3.
how much will that generate in new revenue for you?
About 700,000.
Okay. And are all of your labor contracts currently, do you have any open? And are
Yep.
how many do you have?
I'm negotiating 2 right now.
They will end in June. They aren't.
Right.
And which ones are those?
That will be the secretarial and the custodial.
So not your biggest union?
No, the
not-
teachers
okay.
was just settled this
So
year.
you can make some estimates of what
Correct.
you think you'll be doing in
Yes.
that. Is there anything new in the budget that wasn't in there before? I know you're, as I read, you were nice enough to send me a budget summary. You're maintaining a lot of programs, and it reads, if I read the coverage correctly, that a lot of what you wanted to do was still have the 6 instructional teams, have Project Lead the Way.
We're adding a project
yeah.
Lead the Way for technology.
Okay,
That's a
so
new
the two you
program.
have right now are engineering, biomedical, and the Way Gateway. What are those programs?
At the high school,
The
So
Project
for
Lead the
those who
Way
may not
Gateway
know
at the
what
junior high.
Project Lead the Way is, what is it?
well, it's part of the technology
Okay.
pieces of these programs. I believe.
RIT?
Yeah, we're doing that through RIT.
Okay.
So they do, it gives kids another pathway for graduation. So,
And they get college credit.
right, if they're interested in biomedical engineering or now computer science, because that's the one we're adding, which is huge and upcoming, they can actually receive college credit. So when they do go off to college, and it's a dual
So
credit.
maintaining what you have and expanding, but your hope is that if you got more money, you'd be
Oh my, we would be
expanding those.
Yeah, a lot more.
Were there any programmatic cuts in this budget?
No, you know, one of the things we talked about is restoring of art and music. That's one of the concerns we hear in the community. Right now, we're at a 6-day rotation. We used to be at a 4-day rotation. But the other biggest pieces that we need to add is support services in our building. We need counselors at our elementary school. We need mental health counselors, social workers, assistant principals at the
So was going to
elementary.
the 6-day rotation a process issue or a budgetary issue?
It was a budget issue last year.
Okay, so it used to be, you used to go gym, art, gym,
Music.
music.
Yeah.
Now you're gym, art, gym, music,
Gym.
gym, library, gym, technology.
And excuse Mr. Cosentino, it's called physical education.
Okay.
For those out there, but I'm just.
By the way, I do have you know what, I do have a 6-year-old who says it that way.
Yeah,
He does. I don't go to gym. I go to physical
the
education.
gym is
The
a
gym is
place.
the
Yes,
building.
That's
okay.
right.
Whatever.
Yes, so you've got it
Yes.
exactly right.
Okay, so you've gone to that schedule. So if you did have more money, you would not get rid of technology or get rid of
No, we didn't.
library. It would be just formatted differently in the
Correct,
day. Okay.
correct.
You did have to make some changes budgetarily. You had a contract with BOCES.
Yes.
So what have you changed there? How you operate?
You know, we're still looking at that. We just know we need to trim some pieces off. We might look at some GED slots, being more creative.
but
on
some of
how
those
we do
people
it.
have come back to the district. Am I correct?
Correct. We looked at some special education classrooms. So last year we took back our middle school special education classes. This year we're taking back our high school. So now all of our secondary special ed classrooms will be housed in our own buildings.
And I know one of the items that your board had discussed was this whole issue that popped up last spring was Cayuga Centers. You had an outstanding bill, and I know you had a larger contract issue, but you had an outstanding bill. Was it about $400,000?
Yeah.
Your board had made that decision that they were not going to pursue that. Have there been any?
We tried.
I know you tried, but has there been any further discussions with them?
We did send a couple more letters out, and
So you've sent them a Dunning letter, and,
Yeah,
and
and-
you're just not expecting a check. Okay.
I'm not.
So you mentioned the capital program. Where are you on what was approved in January at this stage?
And that's a great question. Right now, this summer, the only capital project work that will be done is an emergency capital project at Auburn Junior High School. It'll be an asbestos, we'll be doing an abatement. And then we will be fixing the gymnasium ceiling.
And this is something you talked about in January.
Correct, we talked about this. What we're doing right now currently is the architects are doing drawings. We are gonna have to split the first phase of the capital project into a phase 1A and 1B.
Okay.
And that's what I was sort of saying, that the money that will be going out to bond will not be very much in the first phase, because we're looking at the Owasco elementary roof, we're looking at the Herman Ave playground, and we're looking at hopefully being able to do some work in the parking lot at Seward.
And
So
how about the hardening of the entrances?
we-
Is that a phase 2?
No, it's phase 1. It's still going to be phase 1, but it might be broken up into sections, because we want to do all the hardening at one time with all the buildings.
Okay, so this is my favorite question that I ask you every year. So your board approved this, but you still have to have a public hearing.
Correct.
This is the backward. The city, you were with
I
the city
know. You
for many
tell
years.
every year.
It's backwards.
I know.
So you're having a public hearing when?
On the 14th
Where
May.
is it?
at the high school,
At what time?
You'll be
7
doing-
o'clock.
So
Doing it right at 7.
people can speak, but does it have any real meaning?
The public hearing should be done before our board votes on it, so we can get the input from the community. I agree.
Did you have a lot of people come to the board meetings to talk about any budget issues?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
If you had a lot more cuts, you would have.
Yes, we would. Yeah, we certainly would.
So, and I ask these questions because they're just process questions. What happens if the budget fails?
We got a chance to go out for a second vote and maybe make some changes or go out with the same vote. If that one fails, then we would have to go to an austerity or contingent budget.
And what does that exclude if you go to that?
We cannot have any tax increase at all, so we would need to cut at least the $700,000 from the budget. Then there's an administrative component. There's a cap on that. And we also have to institute some fees for community use of our buildings if we have a contingency budget.
And at this stage, you would have to do that in a relatively short period of time.
Very quick, yeah,
There's
very quick
4
turnaround.
weeks, I think.
In the past, there have been other matters on the ballot, such as
Other
referendum.
propositions?
Do you have any?
No.
No.
So polls are open when?
7 a.m. till 9 o'clock p.m. on the 21st. You can vote at Casey Park, Owasco Elementary, Auburn Junior High School, and Seward. If you used to go to West Middle School, you go to Seward.
Okay. And who can vote?
18-year-old, you do not need to be a registered voter. Anybody 18 years or older that have lived in our in Auburn
District for
for
30 days.
30 days is all.
Okay. And how do you verify that?
We do have.
We get a list from the Board
Yeah.
of Election.
No, but if somebody hasn't registered with the Board of Elections, how do you verify that
They-
do they do a paper
They
ballot?
do an affidavit.
And-
ballot,
and you
then
count
we
it after
verify
that.
it after.
At this particular stage, where are you on your graduation rate? I know you have that data in your fact sheet.
So this year we did drop a little bit. We went from almost 85% last year down to almost 81%.
Any reason why?
You know, again, we're up and down all the time.
But you're a major last year's budget had you up, or last year's budget sheet, I went back to it, had you up 16% from 2007.
Yeah.
So, but you're hovering above that 13 to 16 range and of being up.
Yeah.
How about attendance?
You know what? Attendance every Friday. With social workers, I do home visits from our students that are missing a lot of school. That has been working. Again, if we can save a couple of kids each year, that does have a huge impact on our graduation rate. But we continue to work on attendance. That's one of our initiatives.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk to that camera. Tell people why they should vote for this budget.
Again, you know, this is about, we're thankful that everybody went out and voted for the capital project and we got that approved. That helps us so we do not have to use money out of our general funds. But all I can do is encourage everyone to please get out and vote. You're voting for the children of this community and for the community in the future. So again, on May 21st, please get out and vote.
All right. Our guests have been Superintendent of Schools Jeff PIROZZOLO, as well as Budget Manager Lisa Green. We want to thank you for updating the voters on the budget that will be before them on May 21st. And we encourage you to go out to vote. We'll be back in just a moment with a second Inside Government with City Manager Jeff Digert and City Comptroller Rachel Jacobs on the city's 2019-2020 budget proposal. Unlike the school district, they do not have to go out to the public to get a vote. They need to get 3+1. We will finish off our season this Thursday, May 2nd, with our annual Auburn Enlarged School District Forum that will be have my moderation as well as Jeremy Boyer of the Citizen asking the questions. So far we have 2 of the 3 candidates have agreed to appear, and so we encourage you to tune into that on Thursday night. And we'll also have our final edition of Beyond the Front Page with QU Community College President Brian Durant to give a college update that will include a discussion of the new turf at Falcon Park, a proposal for a new culinary program in downtown Auburn, and a new workforce development site on Grand Ave. We hope you'll stick around with us to listen to the city update on their budget. But otherwise, I'm Guy Cosentino for QU Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Hope you have a good night, have a great tomorrow, and again, please stick around for the next show in just a moment.